Hello, so today I will be talking about cognitive development theory as well as sociocultural theory, also known as sociohistoric. I am at work, so please be flexible with me when it comes to interruptions. But first off, I do want to start uh, pointing out that I did kind of go into a sequence chart. I wanted to talk first about Piaget's observations, a little bit of his components, ideologies that he integrated into his observations. Then later, I want to go into vocabulary and certain elements that flourished out of his observations. And after that, I want to touch on certain examples of each one of those elements. And next, I will go on to sociocultural theory. I will talk about Vygotsky's observations as well. After that, I want to go into certain elements, and I want to present examples that support. So first off, I want to start by talking about Piaget's observations. His observations mainly revolved around how students made sense out of the world by gathering and organizing different pieces of information to kind of formulate or process the knowledge that was being taken. It also emphasized that our thinking process is in continual construction. It does not end when you're 7 years old, but all the way from childhood all the way to adulthood. It is a continual cycle of absorbing information and growing and maturing. And again, it is with the sense of trying to have us make sense of all the new information that we're being acquired as we grow older. A couple of components too that Piaget emphasizes work together to influence cognitive development. Off of components that work together to influence cognitive and development, thinking, like I mentioned before, were maturity, activity, and social transmissions. The maturity of us continually absorbing new information as we age, as we grow older, our minds expand to be able to absorb more information, activity in the way we engage, and social transmissions. But another thing that I want to point out is that to cope basically with all this information and all this new absorption, there are behavioral structures called schemes. And schemes is kind of another term for stepping stones in the learning process. It's kind of one stepping stone over another, like Piaget referred to it as building blocks of thinking and processing. We can't absorb everything all at once, but we can take little stepping stones and grab from each little pile to kind of construct a good understanding of all the information that is being thrown our way. Along with schemes are enhanced by two elements, and the first one is adaptation. And adaptation is basically, in a sense, using prior knowledge and trying to make something make sense of something new that you're grasping. Okay, so and then accommodation is instead of making the information fit into our puzzle, we make the puzzle fit around our information. So on contrary to adaptation, it's kind of vice versa. With accommodation, we understand that we got to step outside of our comfort zone and accommodate the information that's coming in. Whereas with adaptation, we try to accommodate the information with our understanding. And then that leads us to equilibration. And equilibration is kind of the middle ground. In a sense, it is trying to find the balance to accommodate the receiving information into a satisfying sense of understanding. So it's intaking, but also trying to find that balance of what we knew, what we're going to learn, and where's that middle ground so that we can feel satisfied in our knowledge and feel like we grasped what is coming without canceling what we had learned before. So it's definitely important in finding that middle ground. And then further down, we will go into 4 stages that are essential to cognitive development. And the first one is going to be sensory sensorimotor, and that is kind of the beginning stage that involves kind of the five senses of a child, uh, from uh, touching, hearing, seeing, tasting, kind of moving. It really enhances the child's ability to learn and develop cognitively with kind of the five senses, um, and sensorimotor. So going into sensorimotor is objective permanence, and that is kind of where children understand that although not necessarily seen, there are tangible objects that exist in the environment. Basically, like that concept, out of sight, but I would say even though it's out of sight, it shouldn't be out of mind. An example that I used for this was when a baby is crying for a teddy bear. When a baby is crying for a teddy bear, you can easily substitute it for a ball and they'll be happy again. They understand that the tangible is there even when it is not right in front of them. So they know, okay, the teddy bear got taken away from me, but I know that my toy is still around. I'm just distracted with something else right now. Another stage of cognitive development, I do only have 15 minutes, so I will try to get all this information in by that time span, is a preoperational, the preoperational stage. And this is where a child is able to use words, gestures, signs, and images while understanding that they are not presently there. For example, the book used a good example in a student saying the word horse, but understanding that just because she says the word horse doesn't mean there's a horse right in front of her, but rather that's a symbol. They're like I was saying, the word of horse is just a symbol of something that they know is existing, but is not uh, is is uh, is not basically presently there at the time. Um, Couple of pre-operational terms is conservation, and conservation is technically the concept that the number remains the same even if the feature appearance is changed or adjusted. For example, I used a Snickers bar, and this is where a student or a child can understand that just because a Snicker bar is broken does not mean that there's two Snicker bars. It just means that it was broken, but it does not take away or adjust, it does not take away from the number. It just adjusts the feature or the appearance. Same thing with an apple. If I cut an orange in six slices, the student should be able to understand the concept that just because it's in six slices does not mean it's six oranges. It is still one orange, just cut in six slices. The next one is egocentrism, and that is the belief that someone else's perception of something is the same as yours. And children do have the tendency to do this as they're developing. If a kid loses his teddy bear and sees another kid with the exact same teddy bear he had, just like his, he will automatically think that's his because he can only see things through his perception, not understanding that, hey, there are other teddy bears in the stores and maybe he got one at Walmart. So there's that egocentric belief of that someone else's perception is kind of the same as yours. He should know that's my teddy bear, when in reality that's not the situation at all. The next element is concrete operational. This is kind of more of a hands-on thinking. It's where a piece of information or knowledge that is able to be dissected through identification, prior knowledge, and different types of understandings. For example, or the first category of it is classification, is a student's understanding of categorizing a grouping based on a single characteristic. One example I used about this is a child being able to understand that teal or indigo is a part of the blues. Even though it's a different type of blue, it's still blues. Same thing with rose, or hot pink. It's still a part of the category of pinks. It carries a individual characteristic, but it's still a part of the pinks. Next one is reversibility, and it is the ability of a child being able to disregard or cancel out the change that was made. An example I used for this is throwing a speck of brown paint into black. The child, even though they're conscious of the fact that a peck of brown paint was thrown onto the black paint, they can cancel out the fact that it was stone, but it does not change the outcome. It's still going to be black because it did not change the color. And last one is formal operation. Formal operation is a shift in thinking from what actually is going into, and this is kind of where it happens around the high school age, around when they start hitting their youth. They shift in their education from concrete answers to the possibility of what can be. And that ties into hypothetical reasoning, a hypothetical situation or question with specific implications, but not concrete outcomes. An example that I used for this was 4x equals 8. There's a specific implication of 2 because we know that 4 times 2 is 8, but it is not concretely given to us. The answer is not just there, but it is an educational hypothetical statement of what could be, because that's what fits the category. But X is not given in the question. And we are at 11 minutes. So next, I want to touch on the sociocultural theory. And basically, Vygotsky in the sociocultural theory had that belief. So, like I was touching on Vygotsky, first I will touch on some of his observations, ideologies, then I will touch into some of the elements, and then after that, support it with some examples. So Vygotsky, in contrary to Vygotsky believes that our mental structures, our processes, our upbringings or backgrounds, and our interactions with others is kind of what develops our cognitive thinking, our mental kind of in a sense mental attitudes as well, the way we process things. He goes on to say that there are more than just experiences that shape our characters. They are responsible for our cognitive development, structures, and thinking processes. That's the word I was looking for. So Vygotsky is a firm believer that our backgrounds and our circumstances shape us as a person, but not just as a person, the way we absorb things, the way we process things. Vygotsky's 3 themes of learning and thinking are social sources of individuals' thinking, role of cultural tools, zone of proximal development. All right, I am running on 2 minutes. So sociocultural tools, these are tools that continually are adapted to the time period that the learner can relate to. They are kind of literally a technical asset to cognitive development. Example, with an iPad to access EBSCOhost digital library. A student basically that has an iPad to access like an EBSCOhost digital library will be wired a lot differently than a student who had to go to a library like my mom. These tools later are passed down through formal and informal interaction. Zone of proximal development, this is where middle ground of the in-between, this is the middle ground or the in-between where child's performance stands individually, where the child can where the child can be with help, guidance, and examples given by the adult system, or where they can stand individually. It's kind of the changing space or the stage of transition between where the child is and what they can be with that guidance, that assistance. Example, a child knows how to read cat, mat, and sat, but will need guidance from a teacher on how to read mate, cake, sake. Although the child knows how to read CVC, whereas they do need assistance in understanding that it is that an A in mate will not be a short A pronunciation. Collective monologue, this is individual conversation children have with themselves of the world. They are solely focused on their opinions, observations, and perspectives. Okay, for example, a child talking about how the moon follows them without the scientific counter argument that it in fact doesn't. Co-constructed processes. Co-constructed processes begins when you work through scenarios, problems, and lend concentration in a group space first. They were first shared experiences. Seeing how your mother responds to mistreatment, eventually you know how it how it how you know how